My record store day was far better than yours, and let me explain why. So, first of all, why was it better? I waited in line, in traffic. It took me 1 hour to get one city block to see something that was more spectacular than waiting in line at any record store for any limited pressing, colored pressing, this and that. Let me show you what I got to see. Aren't you jealous? You could have seen Frozen too. I mean, that was what my record store day was. Hope you enjoy. But now, let's get on to what I've been playing more recently. So, I got on a big Hammond B3 kick. And I'm going to show you a bunch of records related to the Hammond B3, which is the best organ of all time. But first, I want to show you a little bit of metal. Got something in the mail earlier in the week. Babymetal. So, if you're into speed metal, thrash metal, mixed with a little bit of J-pop, check out Babymetal live at the Budokan. It's just an incredible experience. It's as good as any metal being made in Europe or America. Check it out. I recommend it. Babymetal. Now, you can't find their stuff on vinyl yet, but their first album is being pressed in Japan in a limited run, so if you like it, definitely come check it out. Now let's talk about the Hammond B3. So, Brett Primack, the jazz video guy that's on YouTube, HD Tracks asked him to list his top 50 albums that were available on the HD Tracks site. And one of the albums that he featured I had never seen before, so I was a little bit curious. And it was actually a nice coincidence because as I was looking more into this album, which I'm going to show, there is a eBay seller that is constantly buying boatloads of jazz records, and every week they have a new auction for things. And I just happened to see this album, and I scored it for $7. And the album in question is Charles Earland, Black Talk. Now, I haven't cleaned this guy up. I've only sampled it online, but it is wonderful soul jazz. Definitely worth checking out. And, you know, the Penguin's Guide to Jazz, I guess, gave it its top rating. And I really like it. Now, from what I've sampled, I can't wait to clean this guy up and really listen to it in depth. I mean, it should be much better than listening to it online. But this album came out in '69. And the copy I got for $7, just the faintest hairline scratches from inserting it on the sleeve. And it was on the Prestige Purple label at the time. Recorded by Rudy Van Gelder, and it has Van Gelder in the dead wax. And I'm actually looking forward to cleaning this guy up and spinning it. So that really set me off on a huge Hammond B3 kick, and I've been playing a bunch of albums featuring the Hammond B3. And to start out this video, I thought I'd show the familiar, which everybody should know. And another album which I have yet to clean up, but I got it for like $2. Everyone should know this. Iron Butterflies In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. And what makes this album so good is side 2 is In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. And it's not the 2.5-minute version, this is the 17-minute version, which just has a wonderful Hammond B3, I think it's a Hammond B3, organ solo. And at least this is a studio, not a studio shot, but a live shot, but I think they actually used a Hammond B3 for this. If I'm not correct in that, let me know, but I just love the organ work on this guy. Next album is also familiar to a lot of people. And this is not an original pressing. I'd love to have an original, but I am happy with the pressing I got, and this is Green Onions by Booker T. So, very jazzy, but he gets classified on the rock end of the spectrum. This is a Sundazed reissue, and I just happened to get this one for 13 bucks. Beautifully pressed, and I think it was pressed at QRP. And it has the song that everybody, there's a shot of the label, everyone should know, which is Green Onions. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I'll include a link to the song below. I promise you, once you play that link, you should recognize that album, because Booker G is just incredible. That whole album is good, and he has a lot of great albums in his catalog, but that is probably the best known song of his in the United States. Now let's talk about jazz and the Hammond B3. So my favorite Hammond B3 organist is this guy, Jimmy Smith. And this guy was quite prolific. I mean, he has like 100 or so albums in his catalog, and I think he's done like 40 or 50 albums just for Blue Note alone. And so this was not his first Blue Note by any means. This came out in the 60s, and I think he started to record with Blue Note in the early 50s, maybe 54. Alfred Lyon, the Blue Note owner, just fell in love with Jimmy Smith. In fact, there's a quote or a comment that he made when he sold Blue Note, that he just wanted to go on tour and manage Jimmy Smith. He just liked him so much. Kind of an interesting character. There's a wonderful German documentary online about him, which I'll try and include a link below. He's really quite a character. Brett Primack, again, jazz video guy, got to talk to him on the phone because he was trying to do some liner notes for one of his CDs. Has a wonderful story about that, which I'll try and include down below as well. But this is a wonderful album. I like it because it does feature Lee Morgan and Lou Donaldson, Kenny Burrell, Tina Brooks, Art Blakey, Donald Bailey, a lot of well-known figures. And the sermon is just, it's really a 3-track album, and that's just fantastic. This is a original pressing, and it was done on the New York label. And this is probably not going to show up by any means, but they're in the Blue Note records. They have what's called an ear, and so when you see them in auction, people will say features the ear, but the ear is actually a P, which stands for plastolite, which was a pressing plant. And the earlier pressings happen to have that ear in addition to a Rudy Van Gelder stamp. So just something to look for if you happen to run across a Blue Note in the used bins. So my favorite Jimmy Smith album of all time is this guy, which is Midnight Special. And I just love this cover shot. This cover shot is just incredible. I love this album. This is my favorite album. A lot of people say Back to the Chicken Shack is probably the best. Back to the Chicken Shack was recorded at the same time as this guy, but I just happen to like this one better. This one features Kenny Burrell, Donald Bailey, and Stanley Turrentine. And again, another original, which I'm fortunate enough to have. Again, this came out in the early 60s, and it was on the New York variation of the Blue Note label. It also has the nice Microgroove word on the label, which is another indicator that it's an original. Another Blue Note B3 organist, and probably one of the most famous organ albums on Blue Note was Unity by Larry Smith. Or sorry, Larry Young, not Larry Smith. And this is one of the better known Blue Notes. This is the Music Matters edition. and this one is the 45 RPM. I think they're going to do a 33 1/3 of this guy. This one is more experimental, and it features 3 other well-known players, Woody Shaw, Joe Henderson, and the drummer Elvin Jones. So definitely worth checking out. One of the better known Blue Notes of all time. So moving out of Blue Note, another well-known organist around the same period, about the same age as Jimmy Smith, is brother Jack McDuff. Can't speak today. This is just a greatest hits compilation that was put out on Prestige. Probably the best known track in his entire catalog is this song called Rock Candy. And definitely check this song out. I'll include a link of this guy down below. This actually features a very young George Benson. And let's see if I can show you the label here. So I think this was latter 60s when this came out. So it has a really dark navy blue Prestige label. Jack McDuff, Jimmy Smith, and the next guy I'm going to show you, we're doing albums clear into the 70s. Jack McDuff and Jimmy McGriff, which I will show you next, really got into the soul jazz aspect. This is one of Jack McDuff's 70s album. Iconic cover, yes, very provocative, sophisticated funk. And this one was put out on the Chess label, and Chess is well known for their blues records, but they put out that one as well. Sophisticated Funk has actually been reissued, so I think you can get a really cheap reissue of this guy. So Jimmy McGriff actually has worked for several different labels. Again, here's another very provocative shot. This is Groove Grease, and this is another soul funk album. This was issued on Groove Merchant, and this guy's been reissued several times. I think part of it's because of the cover, but the album is also really good itself. So here's a shot of the label. Yeah, Jimmy McGriff and Jimmy Smith, which I was showing earlier. Thanks for writing on this, Chuck. They were actually good friends in Philadelphia. Jimmy McGriff also did some work for Blue Note in the late 60s, early 70s, so here's another album of his. This is Electric Funk, another soul jazz masterpiece with the Hammond B3. And I'm not sure if this is a, no, in fact I know this is not an original, this is a repress, and you can really tell by the label. So yeah, that is not an original label. I think this is probably an 80s reissue, so it's not Liberty. In fact, yeah, I can't tell when it came from, but just feeling the cover itself, and feeling the weight of the vinyl and looking at the label, it's probably an 80s press. So maying on the edge of jazz, getting into the Bossa Nova, is Walter Wanderley. So this is probably Walter Wanderley's most famous album. A lot of his fans would probably throw him into lounge, and a lot of his works gets classified as lounge. But Summer Samba on this is just one of his most well-known pieces, and I'll include a link below. It's been used in movies before, and if you hear it, a lot of people think of elevator music, but I just really dig this. This is actually recorded by Rudy Van Gelder in Rudy Van Gelder Studios, so, and it's on Verve, and it is featured on the Verve Black label, and this is an original pressing with a deep groove. You can kind of see how it has that indentation here in the label. If it has that indentation, it's a Microgroove or a deep groove record. So that came out in the early 60s. And, you know, if you like Bossa Nova, lounge music with an organ, definitely go for this guy. And just another record to show by Walter Wanderley. This one features Astrid Gilberto. And this is another original on Verve that I'm just happy to own. And that guy right there, that's Walter Wanderley. So if you like jazz vocals, Hammond B3, all from Brazil, this is the guy to go for. So I will show you one more record, and this is kind of kitschy, very popular in the late 50s, early 60s, and this is Corla Pandit on Fantasy, same label that put out Creedence Clearwater Revival. And all of Corla Pandit's albums that came out on this time came out on colored vinyl. So what I like about this particular album, so everyone knows Misirlou, which was featured in Pulp Fiction, and my memory's kind of bad right now, but I think that was done by Dick Dale in the Deltones. But classic surf music, but I don't think the original was surf. I want to say it's a traditional song, but anyways, that was my Hammond B3 kick for the week. Thought I'd show you what it's spinning. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I did enjoy the folks that commented on my 2 pressing video for gee, my memory is so bad. Dusty Springfield. So I'm thinking about doing another one. So like the Jimmy Smith record that I was showing you. I actually have the 45 RPM version on Analog Productions, so it'd be interesting to see how this guy stacks up against an original. If you're interested in that, shoot me a comment and maybe I'll put something together. I got several other albums where I have more than 2 or more than 3 pressings of, and I'd like to let folks hear the difference between the pressings to see, you know, can they hear a difference. For the Dusty Springfield, most people could hear a difference. There's no right or wrong. Some liked the first pressing versus the second. So I appreciate the commentary and have a great weekend. Thanks for watching.